Here's the deal. Most devs ship their in-app purchases and just pray that it all works. They might test some of the major stuff, but they don't go deep down and test it all, but not you. By the end of this video, you're going to walk away with a test suite that can test all the edge cases, all the happy paths, all the sad errors that we have to deal with, and all this while you do nothing. No Apple IDs, no StoreKit accounts, no money, nothing. Just pure automation that you don't need to worry about. And this will allow you to move from, ooh, I hope this works, to, oh, I know, I've got it, allowing you to ship with confidence. Now let's get to it. I'm Joshua, and this is StemFox.io. This is my third video on StoreKit 2. You can watch the other two in the playlist above, but you can also just watch this one as a standalone video. So in my last video, we were testing this paywall with our StoreKit 2 file, and it was great, but it was all manual, and I would like to show you how to automate this. To do that, we're going to instantiate some unit tests. Now, if you've never done Swift testing, you can watch one of my earlier videos on that. But here we have the beginning of our tests. Here I've got my suite set up, and I'm going to test our entitlements. And the first thing you'll see here is I've got an SKTestSession. Now the SK is for StoreKit. You'll notice here that I've disabled these tests for anything in iOS 26. That's because Apple decided to ship some buggy code and it doesn't work on iOS 26. So we are demanding that we only test this on iOS 18, but we can revisit this later if Apple decides to fix their code. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start our tests, and let's create the first happy path test. So here I've gone ahead and created this, and the first thing we want to do is when we initiate our tests, we need to set up our session. So the SKTestSession is saying, hey, I want to use our products file over here as our source. I'm going to reset it every time when we start the test. I'm going to disable the dialog so that it doesn't try to do that. And I want to clear the transactions. We're going to start in a clean state. But the clear transactions is async, so we need to wait until it is actually empty. That way we don't have conflicts from our previous states and our previous tests. Now, this is kind of the big step that you have to do to get this to work consistently. Otherwise, you're going to have flaky tests. I've also added a few helper functions here. I've added a buy load product, which is just going to load the product here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is buy and finish. So what it's going to do is go through the action of loading the product, purchasing the product, and finally making sure that if that purchase succeeds, that we finish it like we ought to. And now I'm going to wait for the entitlements. Now what this does is just gives us an async method that's going to listen for the entitlement changes that are going to come through on the transaction API. And you can go through and look at this a little more closely if you download the project. Now that we've got that housekeeping done, let's go ahead and add our first happy path. So we are going to make sure that our subscription flags are scoped, meaning that when we buy something, only the correct flags are set up. So when we purchase for the monthly or the annual, we want to make sure that the Unlock Pro is still false, but they do have an active subscription. That way the rest of our app downstream can handle this. So the first thing we do is we create our entitlements manager. Now, if you remember from our earlier videos, this guy's job is just to listen to the App Store Connect. And this is what we're exercising. We're saying, hey, I want to make sure that I'm correctly handling any changes to the transactions that App Store is giving me. So let's figure out if that works here by buying something and finishing it. And then we're going to wait for our manager's refresh entitlements to finish. And once that's done, we can check whether that state is the correct state. So if we click our run here, and we can see what it's doing up here, it's installing it. Again, we need to make sure that we've selected something running on iOS 18. So it's running, it's thinking. What you'll notice with these tests is that they're kind of slow. So you might not want to run these every time. You might want to configure your test suite to only run them, say, when you're doing a release build. So prior to building your product for App Store Connect to actually upload, that's when you run these. Or if you have something, automated in the background, that's also a good time to run these types of tests. Now, the cool thing is here, we are testing both states here because we're passing in multiple arguments. We're testing the monthly case and the annual case. And that's just really convenient because we don't have to build another test setup for each one of those. And there we go, both passing. That's fantastic. Now, this is just a happy path. Let's work on an error case. So we're going to add in this next function where we are going to see what happens when a user revokes their entitlements, meaning if they wanted a refund, unfortunately, they didn't like our product. And do we correctly handle that in our entitlements manager? So we are going to, again, instantiate our entitlements manager. We're going to buy and finish our transaction. Great. We should now check and require that they have an active subscription. So that's our setup state, right? Now we're going to act. We're going to take the session. See, this is again tying back into our SKTestSession. And we're going to refund the transaction with the transaction ID that we've created up here. And then we have to wait to make sure that that's cleared and done. And we're going to make sure our managers refresh entitlements mean that we no longer have our active subscription. Now, if we run that, we're going to see if it passes. And bada bing, bada boom, we are good to go. And now let's look at one more case that we can set up. Let's look at an edge case. Let's look at, let's say, an askToBuy. That's kind of a tricky one. So to set up an askToBuy situation, it's a little more tricky, right? What we're going to do is we're going to say in our session that askToBuy is enabled. Normally that's turned off. Again, we set up our manager, we load a product, and then we buy it. And this is going to give us our result. Now our result is going to turn out to be pending, right? Because they've just requested to buy it. It can't be finished. So we want to make sure that that is the case. If not, we have messed up. Either we've reverted in our test or we've got a problem. So now we're going to refresh our entitlements and we're going to expect that they are still not granted. Just because they've asked to buy doesn't mean they get all the cake and the pudding. So they got to wait until their parents or whomever's in control says that this is okay to buy. So we are going to now require that it's still pending. We're going to look at that. And then we are going to approve the transaction that we have just purchased. And that, again, that's tying back into our test session. And once that's done, we're going to make sure that it's cleared and refresh our entitlements. And after all of those wonderful steps, then we can expect it to be an active Pro subscription. So let's run this beautiful test and see what happens. So our build succeeds. We wait and wait and wait. And bada bing, bada boom, we got another passing test. Now, this shouldn't be any surprise to us because we know that these things all passed from our earlier manual testing. But the nice thing is that this means we don't have to test these manually in the future. We know that our entitlements manager is correctly handling each of these cases. And you can build up test suites that do all of the edge cases. Just for fun and to show you how easy it is to add the next test cases, I've added a couple more success cases. Like here we go. Let's add that the lifetime flags are properly scoped. So that's going to be the opposite of the ones that we did earlier, where the subscription is active and has unlocked pro is false. Here we're going to has unlocked pro is true, but there is no subscription. And also concurrent lifetime and subscription. Well, let's test that case. So we're going to have to buy pro and we're going to have to buy a subscription. And then we want to make sure both are true. So now let's run the tests. Here's our lifetime test. Pass. And here's our concurrent test. Also passes. We could go a step further now and let's add in a couple more failure modes. Here we go. If a subscription expires, So then if that expires, we want to revoke the entitlement. So how would you do that? Well, let's say right here, again, it's the cool thing is this test session allows us to just skip to states. So here we can skip to it and say, hey, let's expire the subscription. And if it fails, we don't want to grant any entitlements. So here we're going to simulate an error. We use this cool test function where we can simulate where they're not allowed to purchase. Let's handle that case. And we can test to make sure that both of these are handled correctly. So do we grant entitlements if we are expired? Survey says false. Now let's check if we grant entitlements when the purchase fails. Survey says false. Our last case that we want to check is whether we can restore our purchases correctly. Now that one's kind of funny. So we have to have a couple different managers here for that. We take our first manager, we want to make sure that they have an active pro subscription. But then we want to take the next one and we want to just make sure that when it's instantiated, that it gets a pro subscription after it refreshes its entitlements. So let's make sure that that's still working. It should, because we tested this already in our manually. Survey says that we are still good to go. Now, the best thing here, now that we've got this test suite down, we've built up a whole array that's testing all the edge cases, is that it would be great to build in UI tests for this. However, the UI is even more broken than the unit tests. I was unable to get it to successfully work for either one, particularly using the SKTestSession so that I could repeat it over and over again and not have flaky tests. So I don't know if someone in the chat can tell me what I'm doing wrong, but I couldn't get it to work. So this is the best I'm able to get us to right now, is just doing unit tests to make sure that we are handling it all in our logic and assume that the wiring is correct between our UI and our entitlements manager. But if you're handling this correctly in your manager, I think that is probably good enough. UI tests in general are flaky, and adding the StoreKit issues to it just made it untenable. But if you know that you are transitioning correctly to and from gated positions and entitlements, that's really what you need to know. So you could test this by hand before a release on just a couple of the good cases, and you'll know through your test suite that it is handling all the different transitions correctly. One thing to note is that I had to add in this build phase setup to allow us to work on iOS anything less than 26. Otherwise, without this build phase, the app crashes. So you can check that out if you're trying to implement this. I check it out in the source code available through, you can see in the description. Now you've seen how easy this is. So I challenge you, go implement some unit tests on your code base that does in-app purchases. I bet you can get it up and running in less than 20 minutes and get a suite of tests out there testing all those edge cases. Tell me how long it took you. What's the one in-app purchase edge case that you would write a test for today? askToBuy? Refunds? Let me know in the comments. The code's in the description, all the test cases, everything we've got here, including the script that keeps it from crashing on iOS 18 devices. Clone it, run it, prove that it works on your machine before you test it out for yourself. If you don't want to miss another episode of this series or any more of my videos, take a moment to subscribe.